Why isn't marijuana fully legal in the United States? The answer is simple: xenophobia. Before cannabis landed on the shores of what would be the future United States, the Portuguese brought it to Brazil, and the British took it to Jamaica. There, slave owners used it to pacify slaves. Marijuana made its debut among U.S. colonists during the 17th century. During those years, the government encouraged farmers to use the plant to produce hemp for rope, sails, and clothing. Physicians tapped into marijuana's medicinal properties in the late 19th century, and it was sold openly in pharmacies. But that would all soon change. Mexican immigrants began entering the United States in droves after their country's revolution started in 1910. They introduced the recreational use of marijuana into American culture. When the Great Depression reared its ugly head in the 1930s, the public feared these newcomers would take their jobs. Anti-drug campaigners tapped into that resentment toward Mexican immigrants and used it to create negative propaganda around cannabis. Their efforts, coupled with long-standing racism against African Americans, who were also using the drug, meant marijuana's legal days were numbered.
You're crazy. Take it easy, kid. I just want to talk to you.
In 1936, the film Reefer Madness fueled this negative narrative and painted marijuana users as crazed, suicidal, and sex-driven. Major Hollywood studios responded by banning the appearance of narcotics in movies. And in 1937, the federal government passed the Marijuana Tax Act. The law criminalized marijuana nationwide and imposed an excise tax on the sale, possession, or transfer of all hemp products. But the real nail in the cannabis coffin came in 1970.
America's public enemy number one is drug abuse.
President Richard Nixon signed legislation that repealed the Marijuana Tax Act, but created the Controlled Substances Schedules. It's a list of drugs categorized by how harmful officials believe they are to public health. On that list, marijuana was labeled a Schedule I drug, alongside heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. Schedule I means these drugs have no medical use and a high potential for abuse. At this level, substances aren't even allowed to be researched or tested. The Act also established the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse. The group's purpose was to assess the medical and addictive effects of marijuana. Their first report recommended a partial ban rather than a full-out war on the drug. They also suggested lesser penalties for smaller amounts of marijuana, but Nixon and Congress weren't having any of it. They ignored the report's findings. And as a result, the lives of hundreds of thousands of men and women came to a screeching halt. The federal prison population has grown by at least 900% since the Controlled Substances Act was enacted in 1970. In 2016, more people were arrested for marijuana possession than all the crimes the FBI classifies as violent. But over the last 2 decades, there's been a major cultural shift when it comes to marijuana, and it's becoming a states' rights issue across the U.S. In 1996, California became the first state to legalize medical marijuana. In 2012, Washington and Colorado became the first 2 states to pass laws taxing and regulating recreational marijuana. And today, marijuana use is legal for adults over the age of 21 in 9 states. Medical marijuana is legal in 29. That means 1 in 5 Americans live in a state where cannabis is legal. We now know that marijuana isn't as dangerous as people once thought it was. We've seen headlines that cannabis can help reduce opioid abuse, is revitalizing budgets for state education and infrastructure, and even helping to reduce crime. Americans support legalizing the drug now more than ever before, and as surprising as it may sound, a majority of Republicans are on board with that idea. Even former House Speaker John Boehner, who opposed legalization in the past, has taken a seat on an advisory board of a marijuana firm. Despite all of this, cannabis remains classified as a Schedule I drug at the federal level. And Attorney General Jeff Sessions has rescinded Obama administration guidances that allowed states to legalize marijuana with minimal federal interference. The public wants legal weed, but until it's descheduled, we'll be stuck with a legacy of criminalizing people for something folks in other states enjoy freely. Marijuana has long been stigmatized for reasons rooted in race rather than science. So why should weed continue to get a bad rap?